How is that bizarre 2008 agreement even possible? Just think about it. Federal prosecutors had prepared a massive, 3-page indictment, full of heavy charges. But what happened in the end? All of that shrunk and turned into just 2 very minor charges at the state level. This reduction of charges is truly unbelievable. And what was the final punishment for these crimes? Only 13 months? That was the entire duration he actually spent in a local jail, which of course wasn't the normal prison. But the even stranger part of the story, even during the short period of conviction, he was given work release privileges. What does that mean? It means he was allowed to leave the prison 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, to go and work in his private office. He was practically outside the prison most of the time. To understand how such a thing is possible, we have to look at the details of this non-prosecution agreement. This agreement was so much in Epstein's favor that it is called a sweetheart deal. The story begins when the parents of a 4-year-old girl show courage and file a complaint. This small complaint turned into a major 13-month undercover operation by the police, and very soon, with the discovery of hidden cameras and disturbing photos, the FBI also entered the case. That's when they realized they were dealing with a much larger network. And when I say large, I mean it. See, here we are, talking about, at least, I emphasize, at least 36 victims who were identified just in that initial investigation. This was not a coincidence. It was a horrific pattern with all this evidence and this number of victims. Federal prosecutors were completely confident. They prepared a heavy 3-page indictment that was designed so that Epstein would never see the light of day again. But exactly here was where everything changed. Something called a non-prosecution agreement, or NPA, entered the story. This was a secret deal that the then federal prosecutor, Alexander Acosta, signed and completely closed the federal case. And the horrific point is that not only did it save Epstein himself, but it also gave immunity to his entire network of associates. The consequences of this agreement were truly catastrophic. First of all, they told the victims nothing. Not only did they not tell them, but they intentionally lied to them and said the case was still open. Epstein only stayed in a local jail for 13 months, and that too with work leave. And his network remained completely safe and sound for another 10 years. This was a total betrayal. Well, why should federal prosecutors agree to such a thing? The story that was officially announced is worlds apart from what was behind the scenes. What was the official justification? Years later, the lead prosecutor of the case, Alexander Acosta, claimed that, well, the government's case was weak and our hands were tied for negotiation. But this wasn't the whole story. Later, Acosta himself made a shocking confession. He revealed that he had been told that Epstein was an intelligence person, and he had been ordered to back off. What does that mean? It means Epstein was an intelligence asset. There was another reason for this special treatment too. The government needed Epstein to cooperate with them. In a major fraud case against the investment bank, Bear Stearns, he was a key figure who could get very powerful people into trouble. But was this claim of an intelligence connection even real? Evidence shows that Epstein's communication network was much larger and more complex than a normal investor. Evidence shows that Epstein was deeply involved in the world of security and global surveillance. For example, in surveillance startups that were run by former Israeli intelligence officers, he would make huge investments and was a broker for surveillance technology deals all over the world. But behind all these power games, there was a horrific human tragedy. This agreement was not just a legal deal, but a systematic betrayal of dozens of victims. The deception was truly astonishing. After the prosecutors secretly closed the case in October 2007, they lied to the victims for almost an entire year. They assured them that the investigation was still ongoing and they should be patient. But it wasn't just concealment. It was active intimidation. The prosecutors threatened the victims. reminding them that child prostitution is illegal and implicitly saying that they themselves might be accused. They were turning victims into defendants. Years later, federal courts officially confirmed that these actions were a direct violation of the Crime Victims' Rights Act. This means the judiciary itself confirmed that the government betrayed those to it had sworn to protect. All right, considering that the court itself called this story a scandal and a violation of rights, what happened to the officials who engineered this agreement? It is interesting to know that this was not just the opinion of critics. A U.S. Federal Court of Appeals, which is one of the highest judicial authorities in the country, officially described the whole story as a national scandal. Despite this strong ruling from the judiciary, the internal review of the Department of Justice itself reached a completely different result. They did not consider the actions of the prosecutors as professional misconduct, but instead called it poor judgment. This is a very important difference that opened the way to escape from any kind of serious punishment. And the final result? None of the prosecutors involved faced any legal or professional consequences. No one was fired or prosecuted. The only consequence of the story was the pressure that public opinion brought years later. Acosta enforced him into political resignation. In fact, the system protected itself. Yes, exactly. Epstein's main role was this. He wasn't just an investor, but a broker, a middleman for selling highly advanced Israeli surveillance and spying technologies to other countries. Meaning, he was practically selling the tools of control and spying to governments. Let's take a look at the extent of his work here. It's really interesting. On one hand, in Ivory Coast, he was brokering a nationwide surveillance system deal. And on the other hand, in Mongolia, he was busy selling information technologies. He even tried to set up a secret communication channel between Moscow and Tel Aviv. And what is the key point? In all these operations, one person was always beside him. Ehud Barak. And these are no longer analysis and guesswork. We have evidence. Emails that were later leaked very clearly show that Epstein himself personally played a direct role in the negotiations of these extremely sensitive security contracts. And this very name brings us to the heart of Epstein's geopolitical network, meaning his very deep, complex, and of course, controversial relationship with Ehud Barak, someone who was once the Prime Minister of Israel. See, we are not talking about a normal acquaintance. Evidence shows these two people met more than 30 times in just a 4-year period, between 2013 and 2017. 30 times. This means a very close and continuous connection. And well, this relationship was not just meetings. Huge amounts of money were involved.